Currently, we are piloting face-to-face classes in selected schools. With these preparations, teachers should also prepare themselves mentally, emotionally, and professionally for the kind of classroom setup that will take place in a post-COVID world. So I will just be sharing with everybody what we are currently busy with this past month, especially when the pandemic struck totally every country on the planet. And so with the Department of Education, the national agency that governs basic education in the Philippines, it prescribed a learning continuity plan for us to be able to respond to the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically to teaching and learning in schools. This directive advised all schools to implement a plan of action to sustain education through the use of learning delivery modalities that are relevant and adapted to current situations in the country. And with schools doing distance learning classes because children cannot leave their homes and go to school physically, teachers have never been more creative and more innovative than ever in using instructional tools and techniques that will ensure that students effectively learn even when they do school at home. In the division of schools where I come from, Nick, the text-based modular learning class is the most preferred modality for learning. It uses home-based modular lessons and limited online class through the use of mobile messaging platforms like the Facebook Messenger. For selected classes that meet virtually from time to time, Zoom, Google Meet, and MS Teams are commonly used. And for us to be able to operationalize these learning modalities, we develop self-learning modules for use in home-based classes because they are the most appropriate instructional tool to use in a remote learning setup, which we began implementing last year. And this is also the default learning delivery format in our schools this school year. These self-learning modules have been developed using the most essential learning competencies, or that we call the MELCs, which is like the compressed basic education curriculum, imperatively done to fit a fair amount of lessons in a school year when time on task and learning is limited. As how learning modules are used, our students accomplish tasks in the modules on their own with help from their parents who serve as home learning partners. We call them home learning partners. Both students and parents follow a plan for instruction, which we call weekly home learning plan. This is a written plan that indicates which tasks and activities in the modules students need to do and complete, usually in a weekly basis. Our teachers, on the other hand, provide direction and guidance to their students in using these learning modules. Teachers also check and analyze results of the students' performances in the accomplished tasks and activities for necessary interventions and actions, especially for students who may find some lessons very difficult. The modules were designed using self-instructional techniques so that our students can use them with little to no assistance from home learning partners. Some of the teaching techniques that were incorporated in the development of these modules are the directed instruction, the inquiry-based, and the discovery learning model, project-based learning tasks, differentiated instruction, and metacognitive learning. There is also a provision for learning tasks and formative assessment, which are necessary for teachers to know whether the learning actually takes place. The activities in the self-learning modules are also arranged in a way children can follow them very effectively, okay? Each module has a pre-test and post-test for the students to take for formative assessment. The students' scores in the pre-test and post-tests are used by teachers to identify which group of students will need reinforcement and enrichment about the lessons. There are also activities in the modules that allow for a review of a previous lesson or integration of a related competency with the target topic. The lessons are also presented in a very interesting way to capture the interest of the students when they accomplish the modules. An explicit discussion of the topic is usually provided so that students can clearly understand concepts, and when examples are necessary, they are also provided to help students process lessons more successfully. Teachers also supplement their text-based and online classes with other activities by using mostly digital platforms since they are very applicable in virtual classrooms. Game-based digital platforms like Hoots, Quizzes, and Quizlet are especially preferred by both teachers and students because learning can be interactive and fun at the same time. The Google Jamboard is also used by some teachers when the class requires student collaboration. These are mostly the resources and strategies that we are using to adapt to the changes in the manner we do teaching and learning in light of the global health emergency. And noticeably, they're all driven by three factors: accessibility, technology, and reliability to affect learning in a remote classroom setting. It can also be noted that even though innovations have been made in the teaching tools and approaches to suit the distance learning classroom, some teaching methods and practices that we used to do before the pandemic are still used when they are relevant. This is most apparent in classroom situations that still require common instructional strategies like beginning the lesson through motivation, activities, guided instruction, inquiry-based learning, or the question and answer lesson, summarizing after a discussion, doing practice exercises, and others that have been proven to be effective approaches to teaching and learning that transcend diverse learning delivery modalities. We should not limit our classroom practices to a set of prescribed teaching tools and approaches because they are the latest trend in education. It is more helpful if we diversify our pedagogical techniques by combining the innovative and non-conventional approaches with traditional and common classroom practices, just how we commonly do instruction in our schools division.
You mentioned just now that teachers, do you find that you need to upskill the teachers to be able to even deal with what was the teaching situation in the last 2 years? Yeah, that's a quick one.
Definitely, it's a must. Remember, everybody was in a shock when the pandemic struck all countries in the world early March or February of last year. And so with the upgrades, with the changes in the ways how we do teaching in the classroom, definitely our teachers need to be retooled or upskilled for them to be able to adapt and adapt their proficiencies to the kind of learning situations we've got around, especially in the Philippines, because most of us, including myself, this is really something new for almost everybody. Although yes, for some cases like special programs, distance learning, modular lesson are learning modalities that are less familiar to most teachers in the Philippines. And so for us to be able to cope with these changes, appropriate capacity building and learning and development activities need to be carried out to help our teachers, just like what I mentioned earlier, be retooled and be skilled as regards their attuning their professional proficiencies to what we are currently implementing in schools in the Philippines.
Does innovation or innovative approach to teaching always involve technology? Can it come in other forms?
For most innovations in the classrooms we have nowadays, technology, the potential of technology has always been tapped. But my advice to everybody is that it should not be the case all the time, right? Because especially in the Philippines, when we talk about technology, the concern and issue on financial resources will have to be considered. There are still locations or places in the country with without access or with the poor access to internet facilities and all that. So long as our teachers are able to reinvent, okay, their effective practices in the classroom, and so long as what they do in the classroom uh, bring in good and positive learning outcomes, these learning tools or teaching tools and approaches can still be considered as innovative or even inventive without the incorporation of technology. But then again, it would be better if our teachers will, I don't know, will be able to have strong access to a lot of technologies. But for situations where technology is not very much available, okay, it's just a matter of being inventive, being imaginative, being creative in our teaching tasks, and that's it. We can already innovate our classroom practices.
I'm going to shift focus a little bit. We'll be talking about teachers and we're going to think about students here. So there's a question in there from Pima asking, can the use of self-instructed materials really enhance learning? How can teachers know that students really did them by themselves, or their brothers helped them, their sister helped them, their family members helped them?
I believe, Nick, no, that any initiative that we undertake or carry out for the purpose of teaching and learning will already do good for the purpose of providing education to our students. I mentioned earlier that in the Philippines, we are very much into a modular classroom, and that it's like the default learning delivery modality in most schools in the country. And for us to be able to implement this classrooms in the new normal, one effective way, as how we see it, okay, to be effective in this kind of learning environment everybody's experiencing right now, is to do self-learning. Since remember, our teachers cannot be possibly and physically present with their students because of the threats of the virus, and so we resort to doing self-instructional classes by way of these self-learning modules that we issue to our students. Currently, we are piloting face-to-face classes in selected schools in the Philippines to prepare ourselves for the gradual return to the old normal. And with these preparations, teachers should also prepare themselves mentally, emotionally, and professionally for the kind of classroom setup that will take place in a post-COVID world. There will definitely be new policies in the implementation of curriculum and instruction to help societies adapt to an environment that is vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA. The pandemic has revealed the many frailties of the system of education that we used to know, and the experiences we have encountered while we struggle to use different teaching tools and approaches to sustain education of children in the middle of a pandemic should point us to a direction to creating a classroom that will be resilient to any interruptions. Schools of the future will use hybrid classroom modalities, I believe. And so more instructional technologies will be prescribed in the classroom to make learning more holistic. Essential learning competencies will make up a curriculum that is more relevant and more compact in size, thereby decongesting daily instruction of unnecessary lessons. With all these education reforms, teacher proficiencies must be upgraded because anyway, the teachers are the frontliners in implementing all these policies and programs. Definitely, we will need to adapt our instructional methodologies to the kind of classroom that could be somehow the same as before the pandemic struck, but a kind of classroom that will be hybrid and more holistic. And in doing so, we should always put the abilities and interests of the learners at the center of our pursuit to upgrade and innovate our teaching skills as teachers.